And what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Designated Players and MLS podcast. Usually at this point, this is where I start in saying about what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. But this isn't my episode today. So I'm going to throw it over to my co host, Connor, to send us through the intro.
Yeah, so for this episode today, we're trying something a little new, and we're like 3 years late on the trend, but hopefully this is still enjoyable for those that are listening. But we are hopping on the tier list trend, and what better way to start off the tier list trend for the designated players than with a designated players tier list? So we are going to go team by team. We're going to look at all of their designated player history in totality and then we're gonna give him a grade. But come on, I mean, we're how many episodes in? Probably almost 250 at this point. We got to start with Scarf of the Week.
When we're talking about designated players, there's only one team that really matters, and that's the New York Red Bulls, who have the greatest of all designated players, Thierry Henry.
Well, I brought out the scarf of arguably the best when it comes to designated players. So got the Atlanta scarf out. Maybe I'm hinting at something. Maybe I'm not. You'll have to listen to find out. All right, so we have the Landon Donovan S tier. We have the Chicharito A tier. We have the Giassi Zardes B tier. We have the Jefferson Soteldo C tier. The Freddie Lundberg D tier. And the Anibal Chala F tier. Oh, sorry. While you get the randomizer up, what I will say is we did not look at St. Louis because they've only had two so far in their history. Still a bit early days. Hard to get a like consensus grade on a team that's only had two. I would say if we were going to give them a grade, it'd be pretty good. I'd say Klaus and Leuven have been pretty solid to say the least to start things off, but it's only been 1 year, so we're going to leave them off the list for now. Last thing I'll caveat is we're only looking at the player's time as a designated player. So while someone like Shalry Joseph is a legendary MLS player, he only has a few years as a designated player. And we are going to only look at the years he was classified as such. So not his career in total, just those specific years. So keep that in mind as we come up with our grades for each of the teams.
What about your grading system? How did you grade them?
Vibes, kind of. A little. I just pulled up each player on FBref, took a quick scan of their stats, where the team finished, how many minutes they played, and then I gave like a grade for each player. I gave a 0 through 10, and that kind of fell into a certain grade depending on the number I gave. I averaged all of the grades I gave for all of the designated players, and then I came up with like a team grade. And then I tweaked some of them still a little bit after that just to kind of make sure that the tier list kind of flowed in its parabolic state.
Nerd.
All right, then why don't you tell me what your criteria was, and then we'll see who the real nerd is.
I looked at number of minutes played, goals, assists, and then any awards that they won.
Yeah, he did
Then
this for over 300 players,
not
and
over.
I'm the
I
nerd.
missed a couple players, but anyways, then I went and took that information and I gave each individual player a grade from A to F, skipping E, of course, because love it.
Apparently, you skipped S as well.
Well, because I didn't put them in tiers like that. I was giving them letter grades because the letter grades corresponded to a one through
That's
five
fine.
ranking.
That's fine.
Then
That's
that
fine.
1 through 5 ranking was averaged, and then the teams were sorted via their team averages, and then separated into tier lists as such. I only have one in the top tier, so
Mm,
because S is superior, and there can't be multiple superiors.
I see we have a disagreement already.
But I'm glad people know that you're already wrong. Love it.
Uh, that's not true. Do you have your randomizer ready?
Of course, it's been ready.
All right. Well, give us team number one then.
So we're starting with TFC Toronto.
Very interesting team to start off with, to say the least. Where do we begin?
So I've got Toronto at the top of the middle tier. I guess that's C. Yeah, so I've got them right at the top of C, just missing out on the one after that.
Okay. I have got them right now at the bottom of C. So,
Okay.
or towards the bottom of C, not at the bottom, but So we're both in the C tier. So I think we've definitely landed on Toronto's in the C tier. So for me, it was a bit of rough early days in terms of their designated players history. They struggled for a while to kind of get, I'll call it a hit on their designated players. There were some okay ones in there and then some bad ones for sure. And then it got to that era where we talk about their treble, and that's where their designated players started to, yeah, that was their like golden generation for designated players, at least as of right now. Michael Bradley, Sebastian Giovinco, Josie Altidore, Alejandro Pozuelo, fantastic designated players for them. Won a lot, obviously, during that stretch of time where they were designated players. I mean, it shows in the fact that they had that label for multiple seasons. So that wasn't for no reason. They were very good. Once we got past Pozuelo, I think it took another step back. Obviously, the big focus now is on the Italians that came in, but to say the least, they've been a bit disappointing. I'm not going to say that they're bad. There's way, way worse people on this list than Insigne and Bernardeschi, but they haven't quite hit the levels that we would expect for them. So
I think I overrated, as you mentioned, the Italians. I think I had them a bit higher than I had intended.
all right, well, for now they're going to be the only team in C tier, so we'll come back to
They're
this.
at the top and the bottom, aren't they?
They are. All right, so
Right.
then why don't you give us a spin and let's get on the team number two.
All right. Well, this one might cause some trouble.
Uh-oh.
We're talking about Portland.
All right. Why do you think they're going to cause some trouble?
I don't
Just out
know,
of curiosity.
because I think you probably are not giving good information. You're probably going to say something stupid.
Hopefully, I don't say something stupid. I'll kick this one off. I'm a bit high on Portland in their designated player history. This was one of the few teams where I don't think they've had a complete swing and miss. Don't get me wrong. I think they've had some misses. Like I wouldn't say Nias Goda's lived up to the designated player tag, but to say that he's as bad as some of the other people that are on this list would not be fair. So I think they've been pretty good about getting people in that are going to at least contribute a little bit. Like a lot of the people on my list that I gave like an F were guys that just didn't even break like 700 minutes in their time as a designated player. And then when we look at like the top of the list for Portland, like there's a few names up there. Like Diego Valeri obviously was top of S for me. Like it was he's one of the best players of the league's history. So he obviously like brought the grade up a lot. You've got guys like Sebastian Blanco as well. Diego Chara, even though it was a small time that he was a designated player, like we know what his impact on this league has been, and especially Portland. So I think their well-roundedness gave them a good base, and then they've been able to really hit the ground with a couple of them here. So I ended up with them I have them right now at the lowest tier of A. So I'm not opposed to them being high B, but that's kind of the range I got them in, high B, low A.
This is such a bad episode for you
Why?
because I have them on the last step of A.
Oh,
You
wow, we agreed again.
you set this up so that you could yell at me for something, and you're not getting it.
Well,
Um,
listen, we're only two teams in.
yeah,
So
realistically, right? I'm looking at this, and the only big misses, and I use that with quotes, right? I think Chris Boyd didn't have a lot of time here, and didn't really impact as much. And Nias Goda, you mentioned, not terrible as other designated players, but relative to what he brought to Portland, he just never really got off the ground, right? Yimi Chara was good, okay. Brian Fernandez had his issues. Milano was good, okay. And then everybody else I saw as either an A or a B level signing, even down to likes of like Liam Ridgewell, who was, massive in the back line there. So yeah, I've got them mathematically just sneaking into the A tier there. But and I say just sneaking in, realistically, they're well clear of the next closest team for me.
yeah, I think I was in a similar boat too. Like they were definitely A tier for me. I mean, they've had a very good designated players history.
Yeah, and it's shown, right? They've come out and they've walked away with a little bit of silverware here and there, and a couple of finals appearances. It's it shows that their spending has been good spending, right?
Yeah, definitely. One of the more successful teams over the last decade. All right, what's next? So we got
Next
a
up
lot more teams to go.
is a one that made a lot of noise on our worst designated players list, and actually has a player in the naming
Oh, okay.
convention, and that is FC Dallas.
This should be a good one too. All right, why don't you kick us off? What do you think for Dallas? I think they're a bit all over the place, but
That's
let's see
exactly what I have them. I've got them. I got them all over the place. One of the things that I really took into account was the average number of minutes played by their designated players, and that is a low number for this group, considering one of their designated players has a goose egg, a zero, in Anibal Chala, who is the F tier, leader, if you will. But they do have a history of designated players who have individual awards, such as an MVP in David Ferreira, as well as a couple of players who were brought in and present during and listed as the designated players during the Supporters Shield US Open Cup double. So that for me, that's Fabian Castillo, by the way, Mauro Diaz, and Gruezo. So that for me, move them up and down the tiers a little bit. But eventually, I ended up right kind of smack middle, closer to the high end of D tier. So just not completely all the way down, because yes, they have the likes of Anibal Chala and Danielson. However, they've also got players such as, like we mentioned, David Ferreira, MVP, Fabian Castillo, doing the double. Other players I've listed highly, Jesus Ferreira as well, right? The first homegrown attacker to get a designated player tag, well earned, right? And then their supporting cast around there, Alan Velasco, who's been pretty good up to this point. Santiago Mosquera was a good addition as well, but they've also got players and mainly more players on the D level for me, in terms of like Christian Colman and Andres Escobar and even Julian de Guzman. Like those players, to me, based off of their numbers and their contributions, have been not so great. So I think they've got more not so good than good, but enough good to keep them out of the bottom tier.
So I'm in a pretty similar boat. Pretty much for all the same reasons. I mean, every time you look at a good FC Dallas designated player, there's just as much of a bad one to offset it. So based on that, I had it offsetting and ended up with them almost like smack in the middle of my tier list. So I had them low C. I think you had them high D. So let's put them in D for now, and we'll revisit. All right. Who's next?
Next up are the scum, DC United.
All right. I only had one guy. I mean, I have a couple guys on this list that I think were not good designated players. I only got one guy on this list that I think is a complete swing and miss, that being Raphael. And to offset that, they've had a couple of good ones. I mean, Wayne Rooney was good when he was here. I think it's a little bit of a small sample size right now, but I think Benteke's got really good potential to be a very successful DP here. He was pretty solid for them last year, and he's been amazing so far this year. He's been red hot. So I think he's got good potential to be a successful DP here. I think a lot of them ended up being about middle of the pack for me in terms of success. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because there's plenty of teams in here that are very much like Dallas, like a lot of highs and a lot of lows. But DC seemed to be pretty average-ish across the board for their designated players. Nothing like too bad outside of like a couple players. At the same time, they haven't exactly had like a 10 out of 10 top of S tier type of designated player so far. Wayne Rooney was pretty freaking good when he was here, but I don't think he's quite at the level of someone like Diego Valeri, for example. All that being said, I had them C tier. I had them like basically middle of C tier. So probably almost exactly middle of the pack is kind of where I got them.
Yep, this is where you've messed up.
Oh yeah.
I have them at the best level, at the very bottom of D tier, just sneaking out of F tier. When I originally ran it, they were middle of F tier, and here's why. When they started off and the DP rule was implemented, bang, home run off of Luciano Emilio, Golden Boot, MVP, Supporter Shield US Open Cup double. Doesn't get better than that. They follow that up with Dwayne De Rosario, who's also done the MVP Golden Boot double, as well as the US Open Cup. Those are really good signings for them. Everybody else, like you mentioned, Raphael not even breaking 1,000 minutes. Victor Paulson, I thought, was a not great signing. I don't understand why they needed to bring him in for a year to be a designated player. I think the two that really dragged them down for me were more recent. Eddie Flores, I think, was a huge swing and miss, right? What you paying $4.5 million to bring in somebody who's supposed to be an attacking minded player to give you 11 goal contributions in less than 3,000 minutes in 3 years? Huge miss, right? Follow that up with Taxi Fountas, who, yes, on the surface the numbers look good, but as we know, he caused a ton of off the field issues to the point where they sent him home. They said goodbye, right? That to me is a swing and a miss. Paul Arriola and Wayne Rooney, great, fine, no problems there. Espindola and Fabian Johnson, I think, are good mid level kind of DP signings. They didn't really move the needle for me. You mentioned Raphael not being great. I thought Hamid Salihi was mid. He seven goals in about 1,200 minutes. Maybe he can come up for me, right? Maybe I can bring him up a level, but that still keeps him right at the bottom end of the the bottom end of D tier. And I don't like Marcelo Gallardo signing. I thought he didn't give enough for what he could have. Yeah, and I agree with you on Benteke too. I think Benteke and I think Benteke and Click, by the way, both were very good, great signings for them. But I think there are too many D and F level signings for me that kept them low. And again, I will hear the argument to keep them in D tier, but I can't put them in C. I don't think so compared to everybody else.
I'm not against that. I look at the list again, and they, like I said, they really haven't had like any super hits yet. I think they've had plenty of decent ones, a couple of pretty good ones. So I think for the moment, maybe we go D tier below Dallas, and then we work our way from there. I'm definitely not about to die on the hill for DC United. We're C or D tier.
But will you die on the hill for Real Salt Lake?
Maybe. All right, you kick us off.
Yeah, so this is a good list for me. I've got these guys in high B tier, and I think they were held back by just one or two not so great moves. I think I remember mentioning Manuel Martinez in our worst designated players list. I really was upset with and I say upset, not like a fan upset, but like from an outsider looking in. I thought the Sam Johnson move was really bad, right? 55K for not much return. Same thing with Jason Ramirez. I think he was another one that didn't really pan out. But to flip those, right? I think the first three on that list were huge, right? Sabarillo is one of the best goal scorers. He comes up in all of our trivias. Javi Mo speaks for himself. Kyle Beckerman speaks for himself. Joao Plata, I thought, was always a good contributor at around a B level signing. Sebastian Jaime didn't rate him too highly. He was all right. Yura Masivsian, also all right. I remember him just because he scored against Red Bull a bunch. Rusnak at RSL, elite. Jefferson Savarino, really solid. Don't know if I'd put him in the same tier as the others, but really solid. And then, of course, Chicho Aranjo, who, I mean, it doesn't matter where he is. I've got him as a not, barring anything catastrophic, we know where he stands. So, based off of the way everything would. Oh yeah, and Damir Kreilach, just casually forgetting Damir Kreilach RSL, right? Yeah, they've got a couple swings and misses, which is what kept them out of A tier for me. But yeah, definitely a B tier team.
I am right on board with you there. I'm pretty much in the same place on them, all for the pretty much the exact same reasons. What RSL was able to do early days designated player history is incredible, because I feel like the theme with every other team when the rule was new and people were experimenting with bringing people in was just constant swing and misses, and not like, oh, he didn't like live up to the expectations, but still played a lot of minutes or whatever and was like, okay. No, like, I mean, really bad designated players, and they knocked the first two out of the park. So very rare to see in early days MLS. Really great from them. Since those first few, though, it's been, like you said, a little bit up and down. A couple of really bright spots for sure, like Rusnak and Kreilach, and Chicho Aranjo surely is going to be, as long as he's healthy. But like you said, a couple that weighed it down. I rated the Ramirez move pretty poorly. Jaime, same thing. Sam Johnson, right on board with you there. So not too much to add. I think we're definitely both in agreement that there'd be.
which is wild when you consider their like relative success. Like if you took our list and then you compared it to like success in the playoffs or titles or whatever, it doesn't line up, which tells you
which is
about
so
this,
weird because
which tells you about the
they have
spending, right?
they've had really good role players too on the
Yeah,
team.
yeah. They just haven't been able to put it all together. So
Yeah, that's crazy.
I wonder if this team is going to put it together this year. Probably not,
Oh.
but it's Vancouver. I mean, there's not a lot to talk about here, right? Breck Shea, Kendall Waston, and Ali
Elliot
Adnan,
Non.
instant,
Yeah.
instant A, right?
Instant S,
Instant, yeah,
actually.
whatever. You and your weird letters.
That's how the tier lists work. There's an S tier at the top. Watch a tier list video for once in your life.
Sorry, I go outside. I know what grass looks like.
You can watch the video outside in the grass. All right, I'll kick things off. And I'll just be blunt with it. Vancouver's had an awful DP history. Terrible. It is just a lot of swings and misses. I'll be honest, not as many like no, actually I take that back. There are plenty of like really bad swings and misses in here. I'm gonna focus on a few bright spots because it is kind of far and few between. Pedro Morales is if you know Vancouver's history, that was a good one. Ryan Gauld has been fantastic for them. He has been arguably the best designated player they've had in their history. And it probably took like one season to kind of get that title, which kind of tells you the state of their designated players. But Freddie Montero was pretty good for them as well, at least in my opinion. And then it's just a lot of like a bit lackluster ones. I mean, even as recent as the most recent one with Sergio Cordova. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I don't think he broke like 500 minutes, maybe had like one or two goals and then is gone. So it felt like a complete waste of a designated player spot where they could have used it for somebody else in a team that was competitive last year. So I ultimately have right now I have them bottom of D, but I am definitely open to hearing arguments for them being an F.
I have the middle D, but I wouldn't be against putting them at the bottom there because everything you said I think was relatively spot on. Like the things for me that kind of kept them into it, the recent Canadian Cup kind of runs that put players like Lucas Cavallini and Cordova just a step higher for me because I did rate team awards with a little bit of importance. That being said, though, I think it like you mentioned, for me it took them until it took them a decade to find an A tier designated player in Ryan Gauld. I think Eric Housley with you know 20 goal contributions in 32 and a half thousand minutes, 100 minutes. Numbers are hard. Um, really, that's a good return for your first designated player, right? And then swing and a miss on Jarju. Okay with Barry Robson. Okay with Kenny Miller. I thought he could have done a lot more in his time here. Matthias Laba was good. Rosales, again, another player who I think could have probably given a little bit more. He didn't even break 1,000 minutes, but again, when he comes in, matters. But that also weighs into your grade, right? What are you spending that designated player on when you could be spending it on something else? But yeah, everybody else is either C or a B for me until you hit Ardiz, who is just a straight up F. Um, that was not good. That was a bad one. And then a couple more C's get thrown in there until you get, like I said, I have Ali Adnan as a C. Sorry, Adam, cry harder. But
I wish he was here right now.
yeah,
Dial
he
him in.
if he was here, they'd be S tier, and there would be no getting him out of it.
Yeah, pretty
Um,
much. Breck Shea and Ali Adnan, are you kidding me?
I think they're getting better, right? Definitely getting better. They're learning to spend properly, but in terms of all history, talk to me in a decade if they figure it out again. Maybe we move them, but right now, yeah, definitely low.
Alrighty.
Nashville SC. This is an
All right.
interesting one for Nashville. Not super thrilled with what they've done so far. And again, there's not a big sample size here. They've knocked it out of the park with two of them, and everything else is left a little bit more to be desired. So that being said, just to run through the list here, Honey's an A. That's pretty easy. Everybody else is okay at best, right? Randall Leal has been hurt since when he was a DP, he was solid, but been hurt since. But even when he was a DP, he had good contributions, but not like out of the park numbers. Then Jonder Cadiz, who was there for a minute, and that's about all you can say. And then the only thing you can say that is better about Yonder Cadiz is he wasn't Ake Loba. So
That's a
those
good
are two.
transition.
Those are two really, really low rating ones. And when you don't have a lot of other ones to balance it out, it's going to bring your rating down, right? Walker Zimmerman's been great, and no doubts about that. Even though he has been a bit injured, and then Sam Surridge, I've got it as a C because he's jury's still out, right? So I've got them kind of high-ish D tier, but I could hear low C. I could also hear low D because I move things around, and one change here or there could bump them a lot. So
So I think my list right now is benefiting, or they're benefiting from the fact that it's such a small sample size. So I'm definitely going to shift my original spot for them. But I'll read through my list and then we'll figure out where we're gonna put them. But fully agree, Hani Mukhtar, S, top of S. Like the dude should have two MVPs at this point. Like you don't get much better than that. Leal. So non-DP Leal has been disappointing and it's been tough because, like you said, he's been injured so much. But 2021 Leal was different. Like he was really good that year within context. Like I'm not saying he's Hani Mukhtar good, but 8 goals, 7 assists, not even counting second assists. Like 15 goal contributions is really, really good. The team was sixth in the Supporter Shield that year. 2020 was a little bit slower for him. He had 7 goal contributions, but was still pretty solid. I think he was a pretty decent designated player, and I think he's been a below average TAM player since he's come off the designated player tag. So just keeping in like line with how we're looking at this, I gave him like a decently favorable rating. Like nothing too high, but like I definitely think he was solid. Obviously, the same thing with Cadiz and Loba. Cadiz I had at like bottom D, and I think that was just because I had Ake Loba as F, just because I think he was like at least he played a little bit more than Ake Loba, I think. And then Walker Zimmerman I had very high as well. Doesn't get much better than a guy who's won designated defender of the year multiple times. So
he actually never won it as a DP though.
yeah, that's fair.
And that's one of the reasons why he was a bit lower there because as much as I liked what he was doing.
Wait, did he really not win one with Oh, did he win one with Nashville before he was a DP?
Yep, he won two with Nashville before he was a
Okay.
DP,
Okay.
which was the one that got him, right? Like that hurt him.
All right. So my average, and again, I think this is benefiting from a small sample size. The average of the numbers I gave ended up being like B tier level, but I'll be honest, I'm probably in agreement with you that I don't think it's B tier, considering they completely swung and missed on like 40% of their DP history. So I'm good with, I think we maybe find the middle ground in C tier. I feel like C is probably about fair for them because they've hit on about half of them and they've missed on about half of them. And then
Yeah,
there's Randall Leal.
I'm cool with that.
All right.
Well, what do you got for our friends being led by our king, Benny Ball Ben Olsen in Houston?
So early days had a couple of misses. I got Landin and Lopez as pretty darn bad misses, but from that point on, they were actually, I feel like they were pretty good with their DP signings. A couple of not great ones in there. Weirdly enough, like I think Mara Manotas was a pretty darn good Houston player, but I think when he had the DP tag, that was like outside of his best seasons with them. So he was a little bit lower, but like guys like DeMarcus Beasley, Albert Elise, Hector Herrera really like pulled their number up. And then they just had a lot of really other solid designated players as well. Guys like Darwin Quintero, Teenage Adebe was really good when he was healthy. I have them right now at a low B tier. It's low enough B tier that I'm open to high C tier as well.
I've got a middle C. I just think it's a mid group. And that's not to take away from anything that they've done in their careers, but looking just at their history as designated players, nothing stands out as, phenomenal, right? The best player of the group, I think, as you mentioned, is Albert Elise. Goal contributions per minute, per, even per million spent has been great. Landin coming in was really bad. Boniek Garcia was solid, right? I've got him at a B, but so I have also Giles Barnes as a C, as a B, excuse me. But then you look at somebody like Alexander Lopez, who didn't break 700 minutes, right? DeMarcus Beasley, who we know of his career, we know what he's done, but as a designated player, just didn't help them win anything, didn't do anything like that. So he's at a C for me. Mauro Manotas in the same boat, right? He's at a C for me, and Kubo Torres as well. Like the contributions for designated players over a long period of time, right? Eric Torres over 3 years gets you 3,000 minutes and 20 goal contributions. Not what I expect out of a designated player. Same deal with Mauro Manotas, right? He's given you 3 years, 15 goal contributions, not even 3,000 minutes. So that's the sort of stuff that brings them kind of just down a little bit. But again, another team that's gotten much, much better, right? Tomas Martinez was great, helped him get to U.S. Open Cup. Darwin Quintero, as you mentioned, really good, helping you get to the same level. I thought Hadebe was fine. Sebastian Ferreira has been fine. Nothing like D or F, but relatively low. And I think Hector Herrera is a great addition. So I think they've gone in the right direction, but that early days has brought them down a little bit. So I have them in the middle of C tier. They're pretty mid.
All right, so we'll put them in C tier for now.
All right, another short one for you with our friends in the same state with the green color, Austin FC. Austin has just barely held on to a D tier for me in this one. They did it because they've had one, a short sample size, but also one player who's been fantastic. If it wasn't for Sebastian Driussi, this team is low. And again, it's a 3-year sample size, right? There's tons more that they can do to improve and get better. But Pochettino, I think, was a big miss. Dominguez was a relatively big miss. Rigoni still hasn't really shown if he's going to be a miss or a hit yet. I think he's finding his form. I think Alexander Ring has been great, and then Driussi, as we mentioned, out of the park. So I have him just in the D tier before dropping into F tier.
Yep, I'm in the same boat. I got them D pretty much for all the same reasons. Like you said, Driussi, they got a great one there with Driussi, and that's about it for their designated player history. But granted, they've only had 5. But yeah, they definitely missed with Dominguez and Pochettino. Ring's been pretty good for them. And then Rigoni so far has been slow. So I am in the same boat. I've got them D tier. I definitely think we both agree on D tier for them.
All right. Well, your short list is over as we go to New
No.
England.
This reminds me a little bit of the Toronto list, where it's like this one period where they were really good in their designated players, and then it's like the rest of it is kind of a mess. Their early days designated player history is brutal. There was just like a lot of swings and misses at the early days. And then we hit that era of Carlos Heel, Gustavo Bo, Adam Buxa, where that was your core that won the Supporter Shield, set the points record. Like, definitely not something to be overlooked. Like, all 3 of those guys were super, super successful during that period of time. Obviously, New England was able to cash in big time on Buxa. Heel is still there doing Carlos Heel type things, and the man's won an MVP. Gustavo Bo hasn't quite met that same magic as that one season, but has still been solid for them in his time there. But outside of those guys, there's a couple of other pretty good ones in there, like Jermaine Jones, Kai Kamara. Chunkalize a little bit early, but has shown flashes that he can be pretty solid as well. And then there's just a lot of misses, in my opinion. Caraglio, Bangston, Kouassi might still be a little bit early, but I'm going to say Giacomo Vrioni has been not very good at all so far. My average ended up being a bit high, where I had them bottom of B, but I think that's a bit high. I'd probably say they're more likely C tier for me.
Yeah, this is another just kind of middle of C tier for my liking. A lot of things that you mentioned, again, I'm in agreement with, right? Like, started off really slow, worked their way back up to it, and knocked it out of the park with Carlos Heel and Bo and Buxa. I didn't put grades on Chancalay, which might have changed things. I think their first real kind of home run hit for me was Jose Gonçalves. I think I always remember him as being a very strong center back against us, and that was kind of the start of the turnaround, right? Then it's tough to grade against others, right? As you mentioned, right? This team loves a DP center back, so guys like Claude Dialna and Jose Gonçalves and even Jermaine Jones. I know he's on a center back, but not really the big flashy signings that you would expect. So it's tough to just look at goals, assists, individual awards, and team awards, and say, bang, here you go. So understanding how they were able to impact a team, defensively was good too. And I just don't think there's anything that jumps out. Like I said, Vrioni for me has been so far a pretty big bust. I think he's down at the bottom. Looking at the numbers for players like a Jerry Bankston, who is an out and out striker who gave you 5 goals in 3 years. One of them, of course, against Red Bull. That's a swing and a miss. Same thing with the Caraglio. I think he barely doesn't break 1,000 minutes, gives you a little bit, and that's your DP. That's your first ever DP tag. That's tough, right? But again, another team that's got a lot better. I don't think they're any higher than mid at best. So I got a middle of C tier.
All right, C tier they go.
We're looking at Colorado Rapids next.
I do not like Colorado's designated player history. I didn't rate anybody higher than like a B. And I know Tim Howard came in that first year and was phenomenal for them and helped them on that like ridiculous season that they were there. But then he was still a designated player as a few seasons after that. And his numbers just continuously fell from that point. And Colorado kind of fell with that as well. I mean, I still gave him a pretty decent grade, just at least for what he was able to do when he first came in. Jordy Mihailovic, very early days, but I think he will be a pretty solid DP for them. And then there's just plenty of, I might be putting too much focus on current day, like giving grades for people that are currently there and rating it a little too early, but I'm not feeling super great about Navajo and Cabral right now. I mean, I wasn't a fan of the Cabral move to begin with. Navajo, I thought was going to be their breakout player this year. Doesn't look like that's been the case so far in the early sample size. And then there's just a number of people even within that point that it's just like I don't see anybody where I'd give them an F, but at the same time, I don't see anybody that's been like A tier type of designated player for me. So it all culminated for me in them being D tier.
That's where I have them as well, in the D tier there. But I do have I mean, Tim Howard's an A tier signing. I don't want to hear anything differently. This is why you're not allowed to have
You're
opinions on the pod.
biased. He's a former Metro star. You're biased.
This is why you're not allowed to have opinions on the pod. The thing that comes to me with Colorado is that they have not hit anything out of the park when it comes to individual awards, when it comes to team awards. Nothing that they've done signing wise has gotten them to the level to say, yeah, we've at least hit on this one, right? Like when you look at somebody like Chicago, for example, they've got a billion of them, but at least one or two of them have hit, right? You mentioned not having F signings. Kevin Cabral at the price that they brought him in for, was it just a little bit under $1 million? That's an F signing. That's totally not great. But I do think they have a couple of other good ones there too, right? I think Shelton Gashi was great. Tim Howard, as we were mentioning before, Eunice Nomley was very good when he was here. And then I think Maxo is still very, very strong in that regard as well. So smaller sample size comparative to other teams means that there's a little bit more fluctuation. But that being said, I've got them, same thing, D tier, relatively low.
I also don't understand how a team that's been around as long as Colorado has this small of a designated players list. Like that's insane. And majority of them are within the last 2 years, like since 2022.
Uncle Stan.
It's crazy. Like how do you they didn't even try that. I mean, I almost want to knock them down a tier just for that.
Well, like I said, that's big on the owner, right? And that's why they kept pushing him to be better and more involved. And they definitely have been heard, but now they need a coach who can do it right. But there we go. We'll give you another short one to talk about here, and that's Minnesota United. What a shame these guys are struggling with one of their current designated players, and Emmanuel Reynoso, something we might talk about again later on, but we've talked about it a bunch. Another
Reynoso never ends.
Another team for me that is right on the edge of C tier, and if you told me that you're going to put them in D tier, I'm cool with it. There have been, again, with a small sample size, a couple too many swings and misses to say in history they've been great, right? Darwin Quintero's time there was great. Don Grey Goose's time was great. Emmanuel Reynoso, I've knocked him down a tier for some of the stuff that he's done, but his on field ability has been great. Teemu Pukki has contributed as well. Everybody else has been mid to poor. Speaking of Thomas Chacon, who I think I put as number 2 worst designated player of all time, Mender Garcia, who has come in on yes, the young designated player tag, but for 2 years didn't break 2,000 minutes, gave you 4 goals, and that's it. That's an F. Adrian Hunu, who came in from Ligue 1 and everybody thought, oh, he's from Europe, he's going to do great. 9 goal contributions, which were okay, but then kind of bounced out. I've put him in kind of like a D to a C tier because I don't think he contributed as much as he could have. That to me has knocked them down a little bit. So, and Luis Amaria, I don't think ever deserved a DP tag specifically on a signing. Well, the thing with Hunu was signing at about 3.5 mil. Luis Amaria about 1.5 mil. I just don't think that those numbers were reflected in the output that they were received with.
I'm on board with you there, buddy. I'm in a C tier as well. Darwin Quintero, fantastic. Emmanuel Reynoso, fantastic. Teemu Pukki, small sample size so far, but he's trending in that direction. As you said, Jan Greger was very, very good as well. Just a little too many swings and misses to offset those successful DPs. Like you said, Mender Garcia, Thomas Chacon, Angelo Rodriguez as well.
Yeah, forgot to mention. I was just about to say him too. Like, oh yeah, another guy that has balanced them out.
Yeah, he had some big hype when he first came in, and that did not pan out in the slightest. A very Nashville type of striker signing there. But yeah, like you said, I feel like for every good designated player they've had equally as bad designated player. So it kind of equaled out for me. I had them C tier as well.
Yeah. Well, I think Angelo Rodriguez is one of the ones that actually helped them out a little bit. Looking at roughly 20 goal contributions in 3,000 minutes over 2 years. Now, the thing that kind of, I don't want to say put me off it, but I don't know how much there was no reported fee that came into it. And I feel like I remember somebody saying it was relatively high. So to have him come in for that, if he's going to come in for that short amount of time, I'd like to see them win something with that, like win and then move him on. But I don't think that he, was moved on as ceremoniously as he could have. So speaking of moving players on ceremoniously, we got one that has had lots of designated players for their entire career in Sporting Kansas City.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, SKC had a very similar Toronto-esque era of designated players, and in very different fashion. They went big on the non-flashy attacker designated player with Matt Beasler, Graham Zusi, Roger Espinosa. They were the designated players at SKC for a long period of time, and rightfully so. They were all fantastic. They're all club legends. It was a very successful era of Sporting KC. And they highlight the list for me, along with Johnny Russell as well. I rated Johnny Russell pretty high. And then there's a lot of mid people for me. Like Alan Polito has shown flashes that he can be very good, but he can't stay healthy. Gerso Fernandez, I think, was pretty solid. Felipe Gutierrez, Claudio Lopez. And then there's a couple of swings and misses in there. Like Jefferson. We've talked about him before. I believe we talked about him in the worst DPs episode. He's often talked about in that conversation. And a weird one that on the surface sounds crazy to say, but Diego Rubio as a designated player for them was, I don't think he played much at all. Like, if anything, obviously Diego Rubio is a very solid MLS player. And I think even was like pretty solid for SKC. But in the 1 year he had the designated player tag, he played 338 minutes and had 1 goal. So that was also an F for me. Not, again, I want to clarify this. I don't think he's an F tier player. Just his 1 season as a designated player was F tier. I feel like it kind of keeps culminating in the same theme, but it balanced out a bit. And I had them C tier. I think I had them on the higher side of C tier, but I did have them C tier.
I disagree with you here. I've got them in the B tier. I agree that they've had a couple that haven't really panned out for them yet. But I think on all in all, I think they've had more hits than misses. So starting with Claudio Bieler, right, was a part of the MLS Cup run when he was there, as well as putting up 21 goal contributions in just about 3,200 minutes, give or take. Follow that with Matt Beasler, who's there for a U.S. Open Cup, MLS Cup double. Graham Zusi with 2 U.S. Open Cups. Roger Espinoza with 2 U.S. Open Cups. Gerson Fernandez for, the U.S. Open Cup that should never have been because Red Bull should have won it. But anyways, those guys are all ABC tier for me. I think I've got Bieler, Beasler, and Espinoza's B tier, and Graham Zusi is A tier because he was able to do it in multiple different positions. I've got Johnny Russell as an A guy. I know you mentioned Alan Pulido and his injury history, but Alan Pulido, when he's on the field, makes Sporting Kansas City significantly better, which to me is an A-tier signing. He's the only reason they made the playoffs last year. He's the reason why they're as competitive as they are. He's an A-tier for me. And Gadi Kinda was a B-tier signing for me. So balance that out. There's not really a bunch of F or D level players either. We mentioned Jefferson already. Diego Rubio I had as a D as well. Felipe Gutierrez as a D player as well. But all in all, the A's and B's far outweigh the C's and D's and F's. So I've got them middle of the B tier.
Man, I can't get on board with Pulido having an A rating. Like his best season is 14 goals, which by no means is bad. But in the current day MLS, like A tier type of designated player striker scores more than 14 goals.
Okay, like, so let's talk about conversion rates. Let's not just talk about numbers, right? When did he get those 14 goals? How many games did he play?
28.
So a goal every other game.
Yeah.
That's great.
Like, let's see where he lists. I'll look up where he finished.
What else would you like to tell me he wasn't good enough at doing?
Well, I mean, even if you want to focus on that one, like, even if you want to look at other seasons besides that one, like he had
the 14 goals in 28 games he got directly coming off of a knee injury.
Yeah, like that's great.
No, yeah, it's fantastic.
He's been a designated player since 2020 though. He basically replicated the same 14 goals in about 2,400 minutes in the combined of 2020 and 2021.
I don't see your point.
Like he's got 30 goals I won't count this season. So he's got about 30 goals in 3 seasons of play in the league. Like Josef Martinez scored more than 30 goals in 1 season.
30 goals
player striker.
In how many? Let's talk minutes now again, because he's coming off an injury. A lot of those games that he played are coming off of the bench or doing things like that. You have to remember that when he came on in 2023 after that injury, SKC were bottom, and when he came back, they made the playoffs and they went on a run. They beat the top seed. They went into the next round. I think they lost to Houston or LA, but that doesn't happen if he's not there. That's an impact player that is worth the money that he was signed for.
I mean, he had 14 in I want to pull up the league wide per 90 numbers. So we got him at 8, which, like I said, it's good. But that's his best season so far in the league. We got Luciano Costas ahead of him, Cucho, Klaus, Buanga, Maguire, Yakumakis, and Pukki.
You're trying really hard to
I just think it's
your narrative.
I just don't think
you can hear it in your voice that you don't even believe what you're saying.
Like you're putting him in the same. I just think it's wild that you put him in the same tier as guys like Josef, Luciano Costa, Hani Mukhtar. Like he's just not at that. At least as of right now, he's not at that level, and it's bumping your grade up. And I think it's putting. That's why I think SKC C tier instead of B tier. I think you gave a lot to Pulido and Kinda, who I think could be good players, but they couldn't stay healthy.
If you're basing it just on health, then you've got a problem.
Because that's just on health.
Every time you try and argue against it, the only thing that you use every time I go and give you actual data to say that no, what you're saying is wrong, is he can't stay healthy.
That's not the only thing I said. I just told you. I was like, Pulido's best season, he was 8th in per 90 goals. Like he got beat out by an attacking mid. No. I don't think that's A tier.
This is why we don't pay you to think.
Well, so we're having this debate because we need to decide if they're going in B or C tier.
Listen, so the way that you're doing this is you're going to have a C tier that's like 20 teams, and then you're gonna have like 2 teams in the bottom and 2 teams in the top, and everything's just gonna be C tier, right? They're better than a significant amount of teams that have been in the C tier already.
I will put them at B for now, and we will see what the bell curve looks like.
Smart boy.
I hope Red Bull's next so we can continue this energy.
I don't want to talk about Red Bull. Well, it's not Red Bull. It is the Philadelphia Union. Philly is another one that I've got in the very, very top of C. So could move them into the B tier with 1 or 2 grades changed. But I thought that they started off really bad, right? Freddie Adu and Cleverson were not great ways to kick off your designated player history there as you come into the league. Now, Freddie Adu probably good for, and Cleverson both good for bringing people in and being excited to watch. But other than that, first real good one, Maurice Adu was really solid for them. Played a lot of different positions. Ali Bedoya, same way, right? Really impactful there. And then Jamiro Montero, Julie Carranza, Mikael Ura, Daniel Gazdag, like they have started to knock these out of the park, and it's shown in their results and how they've been successful. I think just because it's a smaller sample size comparative to other teams who have been around, a decade and a half longer, that's the difficult part of why they are just missing out on B tier for me. Those 2 plus like players like Aristigueta and, as I mentioned, Freddie and Cleberson, those were the group that brought them down. And because they were brought down with such a small sample size, the numbers kept them out.
So I've also got them C tier, but I've got them lower on C tier for similar reasons. As you stated, the start of their designated player history is pretty darn poor. On top of Freddie Adu and Cleverson, there's also Fernando Aristigueta. Try my best there. Who I thought was pretty poor. Marco Fabian was an interesting one because I feel like he had potential to be a good one there. But if I remember right, I think there were off the field issues there that halted that. And then I think maybe where I've bumped them down a little bit more is because I believe Gazdag's first season was on TAM. So in that really good year for him, he was on TAM. And then last season was his first year on a DP deal, where I think we can both agree he was poor last year. And I know the goal contributions are going to be high, and I think he finished with like 17 or something, but that's off 11 penalties. So his time as a designated player.
Well, hold on. So you're saying that penalties matter?
I mean, when
we're talking about success,
14 goals are penalties, yes.
When we're talking about Josef, penalties don't matter. When we're talking about
Josef's penalty percentage is like 20%.
When we're talking about
was
Daniel
like
Gazdag,
8%.
we're talking about Daniel Gazdag. It's like, oh, we have to take this into consideration and knock him down a few pegs because so I'm assuming that Josef is knocked down like 4, 5, 6 levels because of how many he scored as well. Is that right?
Nope.
Oh, of course not. That's right. Because it only matters when you want it to matter. That's right.
It only matters if it's like 80% of the goals you scored, which it was. It was 11 of like 14 goals he scored last season. But yeah, I mean, he had a poor year last year. I think he's having a better year this year. But based on that, I knocked him lower than like just the general view for Gazdag. So ultimately, we still agreed on C. So I don't think we should spend too much time here, but that was my thinking.
I'm sick and tired of you picking and choosing how you implement stats. You bother me.
I'm not picking and choosing how I implement stats.
All right, so next up, we are going to the Pacific Northwest and talking about the Seattle Sounders, who I have in the B tier. So a lot of designated players for this group who started later than others, but have done a good bit of investment. And it took them a while, I think, to really get a good handle on who they brought in. And in the last decade, they've just killed it. Obafemi Martins, Clint Dempsey, Ozzy Alonso, Nico Ladero, Raul Rui Diaz, João Paulo, Albert Rusnak, who isn't in the same tier as those guys, but still in that group, has definitely dragged up the disappointing contributions from players like Freddie Lundberg, Alvaro Fernandez, Blaze and Kufo, like players that if you think about Seattle, you're not thinking about those guys, right? they have done a tremendous job to turn themselves around there. The reason they weren't in the higher tier, simply the slow start they got off to.
Yep, I am also in B tier as well. Pretty much for the same reasons. It was outside of Freddie Montero and Mauro Rosales, it was a brutal start for them. Like a lot of bad swing and misses. And then they brought in Obafemi Martins, Clint Dempsey, Ozzy Alonso, Nico Ladero, Rui Diaz. And as you said, they were just, it's been like knocking out of the park one after another. With the one odd Nelson Valdez flop in there, which was weird, but
Our king, Nelson Valdez.
so yeah, I think they have enough hits to make up for the rough start. Like their recent form in signing designated players is phenomenal, and it's a sign of how successful they've been in the last decade.
Yeah, it 100% shows based off of their success over the last couple of really the last decade, right? They've been a powerhouse for the last decade.
Yep,
Not like Red Bull, who haven't missed the playoffs yet, but
they
whatever.
almost had that. Almost.
Oh, we playing with almost now.
Oh, I mean, listen, I would sacrifice the playoff appearance too if it meant I won CONCACAF Champions League.
Well, let's talk about a team that's almost American in CF Montreal.
Almost American. So I'll be honest here. I did not have high expectations for Montreal. You look at the team, you think about key players for them. You can think of a couple guys, but you don't think of your Cucho Hernandez, your Thiago Almada, your Luciano Acosta. But this is a really solid list of designated players here. Right now, I'll say before I even jump into any of the players, I have them top of B. So I'm open to discussion on them being an A, but I have them top of B right now because of guys like Marco Di Vaio, Nacho Piatti, Zemaili, Tyder, Jordi Mihailovic. Like those guys are all really solid. They got their guy that they knocked out of the park in Nacho Piatti, who's a club legend for them, arguably the best player they've ever had. They've definitely benefited from the Bologna link. Three of those guys that I just listed off came over from Bologna, and were pretty solid for them, I'd say, at the least. A couple of other good players in this list as well, like Victor Wanyama, and only a couple of misses here. Kike Struna, we know how you feel about him. I would definitely agree. Him as a designated player is definitely a miss. And then Lucas Ontivero as well, I classified as a miss as well. So, but outside of those two, everybody else was solid at the very least. And then they have a bunch of really good players. So I think they're definitely B, like high B or low A for me.
Yeah, that's exactly where I've got them as well. I've got again a lot of the same reasons, right? But did not expect it. But you're looking really, and I think it helps because they're taking the time to find the right player, right? And it's frustrating at times, especially when they're slow and not getting things right. I mean, look at last year, right? They went from second in the East, a game away from the Supporters Shield to not even getting into the playoffs. So the time it takes to find the right person matters, but it also needs to be a little bit faster, I think. Really, I only have one big swing, two swings and misses in Bernadello and Lucas Ontivero, who, as I mentioned to you while we were preparing this, they spent $225,000 for him to play 1,100 minutes. He has been on 15 teams in his career, and that is the most he's ever got in one season, in one team. He has never in 15 different teams broken 1,500 minutes. So that is stat of the day for you. But every one of these signings, for the most part, contributed to a Canadian championship, which again is not weighed as highly as other things that they could have won, but matters, right? So Marco Di Vaio was a great get. Piatti speaks for himself, right? Didier Drogba, my goodness, what a get for them. Tyder, I thought was solid when he was here. Wanyama, I'm still not super sold on. I think he can be better. Same thing with Struna. I never liked Kike Struna. Never was a Kike Struna fan. But and then, as you mentioned, Jordi Mihailovic. So smaller sample size with more hits than misses puts them top of B, lower A for me. So nice.
I just can't believe that in modern day MLS, they've had one designated player for like the last 3 seasons. It's
absurd, right? And again, this is where people are like, oh, well, we're excited the rules are changing. What does it matter if they give you the allowances to do things if you're not even doing what you can do with the what you have now, right? Like, that's kind of crazy.
I know. Think about what they could accomplish if they actually like capitalized on this a bit more.
Oh yeah, and it goes to a whole bunch of other teams as well, and one of those teams includes the San Jose Earthquakes.
Ooh, look at that
Uh,
transition. That was
man,
good.
I'm waking up, man. I've got my jet
He's
lags
getting
off
into
me.
it
I'm
now.
I'm back
He
into
sees
it.
the finish line. That's why.
Yeah, it's true. A team that doesn't see the finish line off in San Jose, by the way. I've got them in B tier though. What they do is get some decent designated players. Another slow start, right? Giovanni at 2010. I think I looked him up and he was very underwhelming. Wondolowski speaks for himself. Then I got players like Vaco and Magnus Eriksson, who I thought were great additions. Christian Espinoza has been a home run. Chofis Lopez was great. Carlos Guerrero is a great addition in the midfield. And then again, others were just kind of okay, right? Matias Perez Garcia, okay. Simon Dawkins, okay. Jamiro Montero at San Jose, okay. And then Innocent Emaraga, right? That's the other one that kind of brings him down. But in a small sample size, more hits than misses, that puts him in the B tier for me.
I have them D tier. And
Wow. Okay, we got to talk.
yes, we definitely have to talk solely because of their start. Because to me, at least the way that I saw it, it was the worst start out of like any team in the entire like in the league's history. Like it is brutally bad. Like I had Giovanni F, Matthias Perez Garcia F, Innocent Megara F, Simon Dawkins bottom of D. The only thing that saved them during that era was Wando, like you said. Like it was brutal. It was really, really bad. And then they've picked it up and it's been better since then, but I don't think they've knocked one out of the park since then, since other than Christian Espinosa. Like they've had good ones, like solid designated players since then, but not enough to save them from that brutal start that they had. So that beginning weighed them down like way too much. In fairness, I had top of D, so like definitely hear the argument for C, but I do not have them in B.
So here's the thing: like I can bring them down to C. I don't know if I can bring them all the way down to D. Right? One of their designated players leads the league in goal scoring in their history. Right? The other one has single handedly been their best attacker for a while, and then they were good with the Vaco, the Magnus Erikssons, the Chofis, and the Montero. Like their last 5 or 6 have been great. They had Wando in there as well. So, like I said, I didn't like the Giovanni sign. I think Innocent Emaraga was mentioned in our worst designated players list at some point. So now you're looking at what did Dawkins and MPG bring, right? I can't drop Dawkins as low as I think you have him, right? I'm looking at his numbers here, and in 3 seasons, 6, 8, and 5 goals, right? As a wide player, as a winger. So not an out and out striker. I think that's a good return, good enough for at the very least a C level, right?
But
In
so
term,
let me just add this context because Dawkins was not a DP in 2011 or 2012.
I've got him as 2016, 2017.
Yeah. And the 6'8" that you mentioned is 2011, 2012.
Oh, okay. Then my
So he
numbers
is
may be thrown off a
he
little bit.
is 5 goals
Yep.
in
No,
3,000
you're
minutes.
totally right. I misread the notes. Yeah, I'd knock that down then for sure. Definitely misread the stats there. Now that still leaves them in lower B tier for me though.
So
I'm sorry, higher C tier. Excuse me.
I think
Um,
you had mentioned MPG as well.
yeah,
I don't
I'm
know
about
if
to pull
there's
that up here.
additional context that's missing here, but FBref's got him at 385 minutes played in his time as a DP across 3 seasons. First, they have a 00 in 2015, 2016. I don't know if that's because he actually played no time or if they're just missing data there.
No, he was 3,200 minutes there, 3 goals, 8 assists, but he did it in really he had a low kind of off year before he got traded. If I remember this correctly, halfway through he was traded to Orlando when they came in. So
Yeah,
that
definitely.
that he played 2.5 seasons where he got 3 goals, 8 assists in a San Jose team that was not great.
Yep.
Again, I can drop him a little
No,
bit
no,
too.
no, no. Their FBref is missing his data,
Mhm.
which is why I was like, oh, he only played 385 minutes across 3 seasons of DP. Like, that's terrible. But
Even
no,
even yeah, no, for sure. But even if I drop both of those guys a letter, right, and took some points away, they're still middle C. So I
yeah,
will I
I
will.
got them C. I got them C as well when I
All
bump
right,
up Garcia.
let's put them in C then. I'm okay with
Yep.
C.
Yep. That's fair.
You know it's not fair
What?
when you play on a 9v9 size pitch at a baseball stadium. What's up, New
Okay.
York City?
This should be a fun one. You're not gonna like what I have to say about NYC.
We'll see.
I don't think that they've had any swings and misses.
You're out of
They've
your
certainly
mind.
they've had guys that I think haven't, I mean, certainly not lived up to their expectations, and ones that I would definitely describe as poor, but not to the level of like they played 500 minutes and that was it. Like Pirlo, for example, definitely one that did not live up to the expectations. He was poor, but I mean, he still put up like I don't have the numbers in front of me.
Yeah,
Let's just
here's
say
what I'll
like
tell you
10
what he
goal
put up.
contributions.
He put up 10 goal contributions in 5,000 minutes, and in those 5,000 minutes, 4 of them were spent running. So what do you mean no swings and misses? Pirlo was one of the worst players in the league when he was here.
I mean, there's guys on this list who literally came in and played like 500 minutes. Like Pirlo played 2,800 minutes for the fourth best team in the league in 2016. Like I'm not saying he
Play is
was
such a
good.
relative term when you use it with Andrea Pirlo, because what did he really do other than just stand there and pass the ball backwards sometimes? So
Well, I mean,
they call him the Italian Michael Bradley.
is that what they call him?
That's what I
Who's
call
calling him that? But they've had very good ones as well. David Villa obviously was knock out of the park. He
fraud,
was MVP
fraud.
and scored tons of goals while he was here. I think Maxi Morales, they knocked it out of the park with him as well. He is like the face of the team, club legend, easily. And the rest of them, I think, were solid. Like, I don't think anybody was jumping off the page. I don't think anybody's been like to the level of David Villa or Maxi Morales. But I also don't think any of them are at the level of like Jerry Bangston or like Anibal Chala. So the rest were about middle of the pack for me. A couple of high ones in there, and I ended up with them in B tier.
Same.
I,
I
that was
disagree.
huge dramatic pause.
I disagree with your comment on no swings and misses. Alexandre Matrica was bought for $8 million, and he was on loan for the majority of the time he was here.
That's fair. I mean, I
That's
didn't
a
look
swing
at
and a
the price, so that's
right.
but
So
that's a
that's a
fair
swing and a
argument.
miss. Andrea Pirlo was brought in for jersey sales and jersey sales only. I think intentionally they brought him into, or originally they brought him in to actually play, but that dude didn't want any of it anymore. Frank Lampard had one good year.
He was only here for 2.
Yeah, and he was in England for half of the first one. So the first, like I said, David Villa knock out of the park, no doubt. Maxi Morales knock out of the park, no doubt. Jesus Medina was good, right? Surprisingly, I think we laughed about it because he's MLS's leading Paraguayan goal scorer. And then the ones that they have right now, I think are okay, not great. Like Tyus Magno, I think has been misused, but because he's been misused, I'm not labeling him as a home run. Martins has been good, not great for a not so great defensive team. And then Santiago Rodriguez has been great, right? So again, small sample size, some misses, but most hits, B tier. Orlando City, a team that has turned it around in recent years, but had a very, very rough start. I have them in middle of C tier. I think similar to many other teams, they have had their fair share of good signings, fair share of bad signings, right? If we're talking about bad signings, somebody like Brian Rochez, who was signed to a 2-year DP contract and played 200 minutes, great. That's what you like to see. Players like Giles Barnes, who was very, very good in Houston, not so great here. Josue Coleman, 2 years, $2.5 million, not a great contribution. However, lots of good hits as well. I think Kaká, I know people like the Kaká, he's just here to finish. He was good for them. Very, very good. Mauricio Pereira, very good. Facundo Torres has been very good. Guys like Erkin Carr, I know he's gone. He got played out by Duncan McGuire, but he was good when he was here. Nani was good when he was here. Dom Dwyer was great when he was here. I like a lot of what they did, but they also have some players who were just kind of right? MPG, the guy who got traded, played a year and a half here. I still had him at a C. Carlos Rivas, former Red Bull, C at best. Yoshi Otun, C, okay, not great, right? Sasha Question at the end of 2018, okay, right? Like in a relatively decent sized list, some very good ones and some not so good ones.
So there's definitely no bias in my selection here. I'll preface by saying that, but I've got them D tier. I don't think they've had a very good list. I could probably make the argument that they're higher on D tier. Like you said, a couple of good ones with Kaká, Nani, Mauricio Pereira. I think the jury's still out on Facundo Torres at the moment. I don't think he's quite hit the levels that we were expecting for him to hit. And there's definitely more to be seen from him. There's a lot of misses in here. You covered pretty much all of them, I think, already. I think I was just lower on certain guys than you were. Like Dom Dwyer, for example, I think I had him at like a high C. Like he was good for them. He had 13 goals in the 2018 season, but then he had 7 the season after that and 0 the season after that. And that wraps up.
You say he only had 7, like Atlanta has like 15 10-goal scorers a season. Like 7's a good return.
He had 0.39 goals per 90. Like that's
Jesus Christ. You and your dumb stats.
You called them excellent. Is that excellent? I don't think that's excellent.
So do strikers just only need to score goals? Are there other roles of a striker that are important in a team's success?
I mean, he had, first of all, the team finished 22nd in the Supporters' Shield both seasons, so there was no team success. He also only had 3 assists. This is only first assist, but still. So I don't know how much he was really contributing outside of scoring goals. I do agree that the striker can do more than just score goals, but I don't necessarily think that that's what he was doing here. And then Erkin Kara, probably being a bit harsh on him, but I think his time here was a little bit underwhelming. I understand that he was played out of his position by Duncan McGuire, but he had 11 goals in 2022 and then 5 last year. And then that's it.
You're just salty that you picked him to be a Golden Boot winner and he got shipped out mid-season.
Was not my best pick, to be honest. And I'm following that up with another stinker so far this year, in fairness. So at least I think I am. I can't remember exactly who I picked. I thought it was Jesus Ferreira for a second, but he was my MVP pick. So that's also not going.
Also a bad one. But listen, I think we can compromise and find things that maybe players are too high or too low, but that would end up putting them low C tier, not high D tier. So I think you can bring them up. I think you can bring them up easier than I can bring them down.
Fine.
And I know you believe that too. Like I know how badly you want to put them down.
I probably rated Kaká, Nani, and Pereira a little bit lower than they should be. So
if I can put New York City in B tier, you can put Orlando in C tier. I know you can do it. I believe in you.
Fine.
Good job.
I just don't want to argue.
There's no arguing this one. Here's LAFC.
I have them A tier.
Easy.
Obviously very successful. Carlos Vela, one of, if not the best designated player in history. Diego Rossi was also phenomenal for them. Denny Bouanga, another one, knocked it out of the park with them. Surprisingly, they have a really short list. Well, I guess I shouldn't say surprisingly because they've had successful DPs. They haven't needed to go get new ones. But they only have 5. They've hit on 3. And the other 2, I don't want to say one of them was, I don't want to say a miss, but definitely didn't live up to the expectations, that being Brian Rodriguez. He had pretty high potential. And I think he showed flashes at times, but was a little bit underwhelming for me. And then Andre Horta, we've talked about him. He was, I'm pretty sure, on everybody's top 10 list of worst designated players of all time. So that one was a massive swing and a miss. But it ultimately, they knocked it out of, and I mean knocked it out of the park with 60% of their designated players. Like, that's gonna get you an A tier easily.
Oh yeah, like I said, that's short list. You're either gonna be really good or really bad, and they were really really good. And everything you said was spot on, right? Carlos Vela, MVP, Golden Boot, MLS Cup, 2 supporter shields. That is what you buy designated players for, right? Diego Rossi, Golden Boot, a different Golden Boot, and a supporter shield. Denny Bouanga, a 3rd Golden Boot in what? 6 years, 3 of them 3 Golden Boot winners.
I actually didn't know that. That's crazy.
That's wild, right? And then
with 3 different players too, by the way.
Oh yeah. And MLS Cup Supporter Shield double, right? Every other player was on the Supporter Shield team at some point as well. Brian Rodriguez, and this kind of speaks to how crazy this is. Brian Rodriguez in 3 years, and one of them he was loaned out for, I'm pretty sure, almost 25 goal contributions in 2 years. And we're like, oh, that's kind of mid, you know? Like there are like 20 other teams on this list that would take that and be like, oh yeah, you're a top part of our group, right? So and then yeah, Andre Horta, stinker. So
It's the
eight,
only blemish on their resume,
yeah,
honestly.
literally.
I would honestly, if they didn't have Orta, I'd probably put them S tier.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, that just brought him down. But there is a team that I don't think has missed on any of them. So we'll talk about that maybe soon. Let's see who we got.
I think we're thinking of the same team.
We are
I'm,
thinking of
I'm
the
the
same
same.
team, and they have just popped up. The team that has
Oh
never
yeah.
missed Chicago Fire.
Never in
Oh,
all 25 designated players they've had.
this is a nightmare group. They are one of, I think, the first group for me because we agreed to move DC out. This is the first one I think we'll both have to agree on that it is F tier. This is a bad series of signings. Not to say that they've missed on everything, but they've missed on most things. Neri Castillo was a short list for, one of the worst DP signings. Federico Pupo, I think, is down there as well. Alvaro Rios, probably down there as well. I think I've got him as a D. Yep. Anagongo, I got him as a D. Oh gosh, Jairo Torres. Not only did he never score, but he also cost you $5.5 million. Goodness me. And again, they've had some good ones too, right? And this was tough for me to put them down there. I mean, the numbers said it, but they did have a Golden Boot winner in Nemanja Nikolic, right? I thought Schweinsteiger was a key for them to get into the playoffs for the one time in the last 15 years that they made it, right? David Accam, I thought was great when they had him here. We did a whole story on Blanco and his impact on the team here. Robert Beric was very good when he was here. I think Alexander Katai had a good DP year. But then you've got players, and again, it weighs down when you start dropping dumb money on dumb players like Xherdan Shaqiri, who in 3 years has given you the same amount of goal contributions as Carlos Vela's Golden Boot season. It's tough to do. And the other thing that kind of brings them lower for me when you're looking at teams, the next team down, Cincinnati, who have had 8 designated players, have averaged, give or take, about 4,300 minutes per designated players in their time here. Chicago didn't even break 3,000, excuse me, because of how many swings and misses they had. So I have them at the top of the bottom tier, but they are definitely bottom tier for me.
Yeah, so they were definitely in my thought process of certainly one of the teams I was considering putting in F. So I am 100% on board with them going in F. I believe they have like the longest list of designated player signings. So at least some credit that they're willing to take the shot, unlike some other teams. But man, have they been bad at taking that shot. 22 players on this list. In my opinion, I think 3 of them have been so far lived up to the designated player tag. Like that's insane. That's an insane return. Like, how do you miss so many times? I don't understand. Are you doing the Chivas example and just picking off FIFA? Are you spinning a wheel and whatever it lands on, like that you're picking a player from that team or something? Like, I don't understand how they've missed so many times, but it makes sense when you look at how poor they've been in recent years. I mean, they've just been consistently poor outside of the 1 year where one of their successful designated players, Nemanja Nikolic, popped off for them.
Right, and it coincided with the Schweinsteiger defensive shore up and Dax
Yep.
McCarty being a shuttling 8, all that good stuff.
Yep. So I am in agreement with you in F tier for Chicago.
Lovely jubbly. Oh, it should be another easy one. The Los Angeles Galaxy, the team that this rule was created for, also an A tier. I mean, just the list of insane names that they've had. We'll start with David Beckham, of course, who you have to give to an A because that's the reason they made the rule. Like legally, like that's what Don Garber pays us to talk about. Money. Donovan as well. Robbie Keane, that trifecta for the longest time was super dangerous. Omar Gonzalez in his prime was fantastic. And then again, they had a little drop off, but not even a massive drop off when it comes to players like Giovanni Dos Santos and Jelly Van Damme and Romain Alessandrini. Those players are not at the A tier, but they were great, solid additions that performed well. And then this guy, Zlatan Ibrahimovic, that guy, he was pretty good when he was here. That DP season, I think he scored like a decent amount of goals. Not Carlos Vela good or anything, but and then
Wow,
Chicharito as
stir
well.
in the pot.
And then Chicharito as well, right? Chicharito, who has, if he was healthy, would have at least 2 golden boots right now, probably an MVP. Follow that up now with somebody like Ricky Puig, who's leading the league in goal contributing actions and shot creating actions and all these advanced statistics that are leading them to success in their standings. It's great. But that's not to say they haven't swung and missed, right? Kevin Cabral. You thought Kevin Cabral to Colorado was bad? Kevin Cabral cost LA $5.4 million. That's criminal. Douglas Costa as well. We've talked to Eli about that in our thing. He didn't want to be there. He was the stereotypical coming here because he thought it was going to be easy and then complaining when it wasn't, right? But with all the home runs that they've had, this was an easy A tier for me.
So I am fine putting them in A tier. I originally had them in S tier, and it was mainly for the fact that they have a really long list of designated players here, 18 in total. And I feel like they've really only missed on 2. And even then, like we talk about Douglas Costa, right after we did that episode with Eli, he like became a completely different player and he was really, really good to end the season. So I still think he was a miss, but he ended up not being as much of a miss as I originally thought he would be. Cabral was definitely a miss as well. But then I feel like everybody else on this list, and don't get me wrong, there were some that were not like both Dos Santos are not like world beaters, but I don't think they were like as bad as a lot of other people on this list. And then, like you talked about as well, they knocked it out of the park with so many people. Beckham, Donovan, Keane, Zlatan, Chicharito, Pavone. I think Alessandrini was really, really good when he was here too. Like Ricky Puig, I think it's very early days, but I think Paintsil's headed right in that direction. Joseph Paintsil has been unbelievable so far. I had them in S tier because I think the amount of players that they've brought in, you would think surely they've missed on like at least 5 guys. Like a list of 18 players, like surely they've swung and missed on like 5 at least. But in my opinion, I think they've swung and missed on like 2. So granted, I didn't take into account like the money stuff that you were looking at and awards and all that, but I think there are guys on this list who, again, are not great, but were solid compared to a lot of other people on this list.
No disagreements, but I saved S tier for the team or teams that I thought did not miss at all. So I think this one should be relatively easy. We're talking about the future CONCACAF Champions Cup champions, the Columbus Crew.
This is S. I think this is the team you were talking about that has not missed. This list is ridiculous, like ridiculous. They have a much smaller sample size than the Galaxy, and I have the same number of A pluses as the Galaxy has. And like they have 11 designated players. Galaxy had 18. A team that's known for being historically successful with their designated players, and I think Columbus has already matched them. GBS, that was your first ever designated player signing is GBS. Like talk about a really good start. Federico Higuain, another great one. Jonathan Mensah, when he was designated player center back, fantastic as well. Darlington Nagbe, one of the best midfielders in MLS history, even now as a designated player. And I am by no means a fan of designated players that are a 6'8" or further back in the field, but I still gave him an A+ because he's just different. Lucas Del Rayon, I gave him an A+. Cucho Hernandez, same thing. Diego Rossi, I didn't give him the max points just because it's a little bit early, but I still gave him a lot because he was really crucial to their cup run last season. And everybody else that I didn't even name on this list still was really solid for this team. And like Andrew was kind of insinuating earlier in the episode, this is the team that I feel, and I'm sure he agrees, is the one that has not missed on a designated player.
Not even close have they missed on a designated player. Like even down to somebody like Andres Mendoza, who I didn't know about until I kind of went through this. The dude's got 19 goal contributions in one 1.5 seasons, like
Yeah.
unreal. Just A's and B's all over the shop. Even guys like Pedro Santos, who was a great wide player, creating a ton of chances, but also was able to flex as a left wing back, became the best left back in the league at early in those days. Kai Kamara being Kai Kamara, right? 5 goals in 800 minutes. That's probably the biggest miss that you've got, and you still brought him in, and he was great, right? Jonathan Mensah, again, as a designated player, was just solid, and then was able to be bought down so other people could do their thing. Home run, knocked out of the park, not even close. Not
Yep.
much more to talk about.
Yep. Honestly, reading through the list again, I definitely feel like Galaxy is A tier because I think Columbus needs to be in a tier of their own.
If we're talking about teams that need to be in a league of their own, let's talk about Atlanta United and how we can get them below F tier.
Oh God, they're
Because
the
God, were
worst.
they terrible? No, I've got them in A tier as well. They've slowed down in the middle part of their history, so to speak, in designated players. I think Hector Villalba's 2017 year was unreal. Like, I didn't realize in that one year.
Yeah, me neither, and I'm a fan of the team.
Yeah, 23 goal contributions in the
That's
2017 year.
insane.
That's absurd.
Yeah.
Like, that's designated player returns, right? And he got bought down after that, right? Miguel Almiron, of course. Josef, BWP clears, but that's probably it. Yeah, Ezekiel Barco was part of the MLS Cup, US Open Cup double, but he was underwhelming. South American Player of the Year, Pity Martinez, was also underwhelming. Moreno was okay. I think, he didn't really fit in the scheme that they were doing. This is now where you kind of see that drop off. Alan Franco was the best of this group, but then Luis Araujo, again, disappointing. And then they just kick it back up. And here's, World Cup winner Thiago Almada and Georgios. I'm going to score everything that comes anywhere near me. Giacomakis, both knocking out of the park. And then Saba, jury's still out on Saba, but he seems like he's fitting in pretty well too. So it's an A-tier team. They no real swings and misses, but some players that they spent lots of money on that did not come back. This was also the team, I believe, that spent the most average price per DP at like 8 million per.
I would say that, yeah, I'm kind of in agreement that this may be another team where you could say there's been no swings and misses, but I had Arujo pretty low, like,
Yeah.
and by no means was he like to the level that a lot of these other guys are. Like, he still put up 20 goal contributions across the 3 seasons he was here, which like is not a great return, but we're looking at guys who like put up 20, like not 20, put up like maybe 10 goal contributions across that same time period.
Well, I
Um,
think it also ties into the price, right? Hector Villalba did 23 goal contributions in one season for 2.5 mil. Luis Araujo over 3 seasons for 11.5 mil gave you the same numbers, right? That's where my relative scale, and my
inflation.
scale was kind of in between the team, right? That, like, yeah, if you paid 11.5 mil for 25 goal contributions in 3 years, whereas Brenner gave you 11.5 mil for 30 goal contributions over 3 years, right? Those are different levels to me because of different teams and expectations.
Yep. No disagreements, but I think Atlanta suffers from a few instances of just not meeting expectations, but again, not in a situation where I think they were swing and miss DPs. Like
Sure.
Marco for sure did not live up to expectations, but I wouldn't classify him as a bad DP. Like at the worst, I think he was okay. But obviously his price tag and his hype was massive when he came in. So people will look back and remember him as being a disappointing DP. I think same thing with PT Martinez, kind of in the same boat. But honestly, numbers wise, I don't think he was a bad DP either. So yeah, I 100% had them at A tier as well. They've knocked it out of the park. Like they've had some of the best DPs in the league's history with some of the guys that they've had, and the rest of them have been. I think they've still been solid, even if they haven't lived up to their price tag or expectations.
Yep. No disagreements there. But if you want to talk about teams that haven't lived up to their expectations, let's head over to Charlotte and talk about their relatively short DP history and their relatively short history.
I don't think Charlotte fans are gonna like this one, but I'd make the argument they're F tier. It's a small sample size, very small, because obviously Charlotte hasn't been around for super long. But to me, Swiderski was the only one that had any bit of success at the DP spot. Obviously, jury's still out on Abada. He just joined, but like Swiderski was the only one that was able to do anything over the last few seasons, and even then, he was solid. I think I had him as like a B. Like he wasn't terrible for sure. Definitely would not classify him as a miss, but I feel like the other three have been misses. I mean, Capetti's still a bit recent, but he's been well under expectations and not in the same conversation that we have with Atlanta, where he's like still putting up some numbers and below expectations. Like he's been bad. Juzwiak was, I think, also poor. Alcivar, same conversation. And all of a sudden, if we take Abada out of the conversation, that's 75% of your designated players that I think have been swings and misses. And for me, that's F tier. So that's where I have them.
Yeah, that's not a bold thing. That's where I'm at too, right? Jordi Alcivar was your first signing. You signed him for what, $3 million? He gave you a goal and assist, and you shipped him out the door. Swiderski was your best of your best, but even he was underwhelming at times, right? And I think it also plays to the team that was around him. But you tried to partner him with Jozwiak, and that didn't work. Jozwiak was super poor. Capetti coming in at 6 mil, giving you 10 goal contributions in now a year and a little bit. That's not, that's that's not what you're looking for, right? I'll just put it bluntly there. So I've left him at a C in that sense, because I was curious to see where he'd go from there. But I also didn't put a grade on Abada. He looks like he'll be okay, but you never know. Yeah, this is an F tier team right now. Again, small sample size, but mainly misses and one kind of hit. But yeah, I've actually got him the worst graded of all of them. So
I think I do too.
And I think really it's a factor of the fact they just don't have a lot. They haven't taken a lot of swings yet, but the swings that they've taken, they've missed.
Yeah, for sure. Unlike the Mets, if you know what I'm saying.
Yo, up the Mets, right? Like big up the Mets.
And that's your Mets moment of this episode.
Oh man, if we're talking about teams in orange and blue, how about FC Cincinnati?
I thought you were going to say Inter Miami.
What? Orange and blue?
No, obviously I didn't think you were going to say Inter Miami.
You're out of your mind. I have them C tier. I've got them kind of right in the middle. The smaller sample size has gotten a lot better, as is evident from their recent successes. But a couple of big misses, right? Fernando Adi in his 1 year here after blowing it up in Portland gives you 1,000 minutes and says, see you later. Not great. Again, in a memory of our good friend Adam, we have to give Jurgen Locadia a lower grade than maybe deserved, but I think this one's pretty much deserved. 3 goals, less than 2,000 minutes. Again, during COVID, so maybe a little different there, but I've also graded Bupensta relatively low. His technical ability has been poor. I've watched him a couple of times live in person, and he's not been great. Not to mention his off the field stuff, right? So, that brings him down a little bit. But flip that, and they've also hit it out of the park with players like Nuovido and Acosta and Brenner. So balance it out, put it right in C tier. Have a good day.
I couldn't have said it better than myself.
That's because you can't speak clearly as you're said.
Shut up.
Oh wow.
Yeah. I would say a pretty rough start, and that pretty much matched up exactly with their poor performances at the start of their franchise, and then once they brought in Bernard, Lucia Costa, and Noel Bedeau, all of a sudden you see a turn in their performances. And honestly, that's honestly the lesson I've learned throughout this entire episode, is that designated player performance is really a key driver in a team's success. Like when teams have had good designated players, that's been their best period.
Yeah. And again, it's the function of the roster rules, function of the spending mechanisms that we have. But we say it all the time. If you're not going to hit on your designated players, get ready for a long year.
Yep.
So we've got 2 teams left. One of them is the greatest team in the world with the greatest players of all time, who will be winning everything, including the game against the other team that is left. And the other team is Inter Miami.
That feels kind of rigged that the 2 teams playing each other are the ones that are left.
Honestly, man, I thought the same thing. I'm like, why are we waiting so long? Oh man, well, we are left with the greatest team on the face of the earth, the New York Red Bulls, up the Metro. Oh, forgot my bucket hat
You got to bring it in for the segment. That's fair
just for
enough.
this one. Yeah, up the Metro. I've got them mid to low C tier. It is a sad day in Red Bull land when we look at the first crop of designated players, the Juan Pablo Angels, the Thierry Henrys, the Tim Cahills, the Bradley Wright Phillips of the world, even the Sasha Kljestan, I'll throw him in there as early, and then the more recent signings of players like Josh Sims and Drew Yearwood and Patrick Klamala and even Luquinhas to a degree and Omer Damari for 2 weeks just so you can get a red card. Bum. But even in the early days, they swung and missed a bunch too, right? Claudio Reyna gave you 2,000 minutes in 2 years. He was hurt. Rafa Marquez, we won't go into that because we'll be here all day. Frank Ross, I think, was a waste of a get too, right? But yeah, it's just been the designated player tag has been used a little bit too liberally for the New York Red Bulls in the past, where they are just slapping it on anybody they want to bring in and hope that they can develop and sell on. And it has not given us a good history, though I do believe it's turning around a little bit now that Forsberg has come in and they're kind of planning for things a little better. So yeah, I got a mid C tier. It's been okay, not great recently, but it was good before.
Yeah, I've got the mid C tier also. There is it looks to be a long history of Red Bull either knocking it out of the park or completely missing, and not much in between.
Right.
Like you either get Thierry Henry, Bradley Wright Phillips, or Sasha Kljestan, or you're getting Frank Ross, Rafa Marquez, Omer Damari. So it's been up and down. Your highs have been really high, your lows have been really low. Like you said, in recent years, I feel like it's been a bit more stable, but I still think some guys have been underwhelming. I'm not a big fan of Yearwood under the DP tag. Klamala, we talked about. Klamala's probably got the worst like XG to goals ratio in MLS history. Like,
How dare you disrespect Tom Barlow like that?
I think Klamala's is. I saw it today. Klamala's like 21 and a half XG and like 13 goals. Like it's something ridiculous like that. But yeah, like you said, I think this season is becoming a turning point for them, and you're starting to see maybe some more success from the DPs. Like Van Zier seems to be starting to get going, and Forsberg seems to be a really good addition for the team. So maybe this is a sign of things to kind of turn a new leaf. Because honestly, I think the team hasn't hit on a DP since Sasha, which has been 7 years now. So you're
Oh,
due.
we hit on them, but not long term. Like Taku, for example, or Luquinhas have like a half of a good season, and we're like, oh my god, we're so back, and then they forget how to kick a ball for like the rest of the time they're here, and it's like, oh, that was fun. So that'll always be the frustrating thing with Red Bull as your owners, right? Is they aren't looking to win; they're looking to make money. So they are more looking for the cheap bargain or, go from there. But who knows? Maybe Timo Werner comes in and is the new Tom Barlow and is missing 500 breakaways a season, and we're paying him dumb money to do it too.
It
Speaking
would
of
be the
paying,
Red Bull way.
speaking of paying people dumb money to do really not a lot of stuff, let's finish up with Inter Miami here.
This is an interesting one. They had a rough start, which lines up perfectly with their rough start with the franchise as well. Matthias Pellegrini, very poor as a designated player. Pizarro just could never get up to that expectation. I'm sure he's going to be low on yours because they paid a lot of money for Pizarro, from what I remember. Gonzalo Higuain, I'll let you make your comments about Penn Merchant and all that stuff. But in terms of early days designated players for them, he was the only somewhat bright spot for them. He was pretty good for them. And then you have Blaise Matuidi, who counters that with being pretty poor. Then it starts to get better. Grigor or Gregory. I still don't know which was the right pronunciation.
I'm gonna make you a list of how to pronounce everything because that's
That would be helpful. I would appreciate that.
Grigor. Oh my god! It's like this shows that you don't actually watch anything either. By the way, because they say it all the time on the broadcast.
Pozuelo, even though it was short, he wasn't too bad. Campagna, I think, has higher expectations than we've seen so far, but Still hasn't. I wouldn't call him bad. I wouldn't also call it a miss either. Messi, he's been here for a short amount of time. I've already given him A plus 10, whatever you want to call it, like maximum. We've seen enough. Like what we've seen this season, I've seen enough. Like the guy's obviously on a different level than everybody else in this league. Even if he didn't do anything, I don't really care. Like the impact he had on the league was ridiculous. And then Busquets, I think has also been pretty solid so far. Obviously, like team's in first place right now, so his impact has been helpful. I think the slow start countered out with the better form in recent years had me have them in C.
I also have them mid C tier, just very, very middle of the pack. So I've got, as you mentioned, Matthias Pellegrini, garbage, right? You put him on your list for the worst designated players, and I kept him off because he was still in the league or still playing. So I was like, oh, maybe he can get back and be better. He didn't. He was terrible. He was terrible for City. He was terrible here. He was bad. And 8.18 million euros is not a number to laugh at. Pizarro was the same way, where he was 11 mil and he was on loan for most of the time and didn't even break 20 goal contributions or 4,000 minutes. Disappointing. Higuain did well. Blaise Matuidi, I gave an F because they cheated to get him. He wasn't either supposed to be a DP or was mislabeled, whatever it may be, and they still sucked with him, so he gets an F. But Gregory, Campagna, Pozuelo, Messi, and Busquets all up there. I have Pozuelo more mid than anything because he was only here for a year. And if I look at the 2022 standings, I think that was the year that they were in. Yeah, they were in sixth place. They got in on the last day. So, his impact was good, but just about good. And then, of course, Messi. That guy's kind of good. So
He's
he
all
gets
right.
an A. Yeah. So mid C tier for me too. I'm with you.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening. I know this was a little bit of a long episode. Hopefully, the edit doesn't end up being too choppy here, but thanks for listening. Let us know what your thoughts are and where you would place each team in the tier list. And hopefully, if you all like this style of episode, we will hopefully do some more tier lists in the future. And as we do more, we'll hopefully get a little bit more clean and sure of what exactly we will explain in the episode. So bear with us here. Hopefully this will get better if we do stick with this. If uh, if you want to see any of our other content, we are on all the street. I don't remember the format. You usually do it. I usually zone out. But if you want to listen to any of our other stuff, we do MLS history, we do games, we do current MLS news, we do lots of different things. We do top 10 lists as well. Check us out on any of these podcast platforms, Spotify, iTunes, or iTunes, Apple. um, and then follow us on social media as well. We post clips, we post episodes. That's YouTube, Twitter. We phased out Instagram, I think, and TikTok. And I don't know if we use Facebook anymore either. Do we use Facebook anymore?
Not really.
Okay, so just TikTok, YouTube, and Twitter. So if you want to keep up to date with our content, check out any of those sites. And that's it. Anything else to add?
That'll do it.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening, and we will catch you on the next episode of the Designated Players. See ya.